Let's go to Andy Demetra. He's a former Syracuse guy. Is the voice of the Yellow Jackets. And one time, you guys may not know this, but the Yellow Jacket, the mascot, shoved me, thinking I was someone else.
The Ramblin' Wreck shoved you?
Yeah, he pushed me, Andy, and I almost fell over, and then he realized that it wasn't the person he thought it was.
Case of mistaken identity. You didn't file charges against Buzz now, did you?
No, he's one of my favorite. Him and the Demon Deacon are my two favorite mascots. Sorry.
A lot of Syracuse fans around here, Andy, are wishing that they got to do that to Paulie, but unfortunately Buzz got to him first. So
yeah, maybe Buzz knew something we did not suppose.
Let's get into the tonight's game here a little bit. Georgia Tech coming off 2 straight conference wins. You got a win over Notre Dame and Boston College in there. Direction the Yellow Jackets are heading coming into tonight. Looks like you're playing some pretty good basketball.
Yeah, they're playing their best basketball, and they're coming off by far their most complete 40 minutes of the season versus Boston College on Saturday. Tech has won 3 straight. They've set a new season high in field goal percentage in each of those games. So they're averaging 56% from the floor over their last 3 with an assist rate at about 67%. They're sharing the basketball well. I think they have a better sense of themselves in spite of their relative lack of continuity because of injuries and guys in and out of the lineup. And they're playing with some climbing confidence, guys. But now the big question is, can that carry over to the road? Because they have yet to win a game away from McCambus Pavilion this year. So this will test the mettle of this Georgia Tech team tonight and their composure and whether they can stick to their same principles and their winning ingredients, but in doing so outside of Atlanta.
Yeah, it's not like, those road losses are awful. I mean, a loss to Oklahoma, a loss to North Carolina thrown in there. So it's not like you're playing bad basketball teams. What is the identity of this basketball team under Stoudemire?
Well, for this year, I would say it took a while for them to figure that out. They brought in a lot of pieces out of the transfer portal, and like I said, they had to weather some rotten injury luck that caused them to have so many different lineup combinations in the early going. But I think you'll see offensively tonight a Georgia Tech team that moves the ball well. They don't want a lot of stagnant possessions. They have the ACC's as fifth leader in Nate George. Bidongo maybe hasn't taken that sophomore jump that everybody anticipated he would. He was ACC All-Rookie last year, preseason second-team All-ACC. He still commands a lot of gravity in the half court, but maybe his numbers aren't quite where he or David Stoudemire anticipated they would be. But Lance Terry is back, and he redshirted last year because of injury. The year prior, he was a 10-point-a-game scorer and shot 42% from 3 in the ACC. They really missed his floor spreading and his shot making last season. He leads Georgia Tech in scoring. They got Javian McCollum, who was the leading scorer at Oklahoma last year. He's been terrific during this win streak. He's been more aggressive hunting his shot and giving them somebody who can get Georgia Tech a bucket off the bounce, which they've lacked that kind of player in recent seasons. So, like I said, it's all kind of coalescing now in a more distinct identity on offense for Georgia Tech. Their numbers are reflecting that. Defensively, it's been a little up and down. They probably still run into some foul trouble issues, but they're doing a better job of that of late. But offensively, I think is where the turnaround is mostly taken place for Georgia Tech here over the last couple of weeks.
Terry shooting 42% from behind the arc this year, 37 of 88. Looking at last year's game, and you talked about all the different pieces, but the one kind of carryover is Dongo down low. He had 16 points against Syracuse last year. Like, why was he able to be so successful against SU, and kind of do you see that carrying over maybe to tonight?
It'll be interesting because they run by in a lot of pick and rolls with Nate George and giving it to him on the short roll. Mm-hmm. And so he'll be catching from, the elbow, high post area, and he can either take a gather dribble, get to the rim, or spray it out to a corner three-point shooter, or they'll also lob it to him in the long post. And so at 6'9", he's more of a sinewy player. It'll be a really fun matchup to watch him and Donnie Freeman tonight. I really believe that. But by his good touch, he can shoot over either shoulder. He can square up from the mid-range. His field goal percentage, in spite of maybe not being as dominant a player as they thought he would be this year, it's still right around 55%. So he's really good around that 15-foot area. He's an active rebounder. The issue with Bai this year is that he has not done the greatest job protecting that second foul, and so he's been settled by foul trouble really each of the last 2 games. It nearly cost Tech against Notre Dame. Wasn't an issue versus Boston College because they got great production off the bench. But that's been a bit of a thorn in Bai's side this season. But that's mainly how he operates. And, again, he's been sort of that anchor and a guy who still commands a lot of attention in the half court.
Andy, when you look at Syracuse from afar, what do you see of this basketball team this year?
I see a team that's a lot better than 6-8, and I know it's hard to replace even in the short term an 18-point-a-game score. But I just look at that Florida State game. You got J.J. Starling back. We know what kind of a shot maker he is. Chris Bell started to rediscover his three-point touch versus Florida State. Georgia Tech was very fortunate in that matchup last year that he was only 2 of 7 because the very next game was NC State. When you guys remember, he banged down 8 in a row from beyond the arc versus NC State. The Tech missed that by 1 game. And then you have Donnie Freeman, who had just such a great turnaround artist. He's a springy rebounder and somebody who's very deserving of that first-round NBA draft attention. Between those 3 guys, you have shot makers. And if those 3 guys, or even some combination of 2 of them, are really lighting it up, they can cause a lot of problems. So as we were talking about during the commercial break, guys, it's a day-to-day existence in the ACC. What Georgia Tech did these last 3 games, who knows how much that'll carry over to tonight. And similarly, as anemic as maybe Syracuse's offense has looked in the last several weeks, you're always 1 game away from a turnaround and completely resetting the course of the season. So I just see a lot of bucket getters on Syracuse's team, and that alone should inspire a lot of respect and concern from Georgia Tech.
Do you see this game then being played in the 80s? Because I look at last game for Syracuse. You give up 54 points, and they've been a bad defensive team all season long. Or is this a grinded out type of game?
I don't think Georgia Tech thrives in those grinded out games. Now there will be some nights where they have to play through their defense, and defense has been responsible for some of their non-conference wins. But I think when this team is getting out and pushing tempo and getting run-ahead passes, holding teams to one-shot possessions and using that to get early possession shots, I think that's when they're at their best. And so I would say this game will skew much more towards 1 in the 70s, maybe 80s, than it would in the 60s. And I think Georgia Tech probably knows that if they want to come out of the J-May Wireless Dome with a win, they probably got to get that needle up into the 80s to do so.
Paul and I said for Syracuse, these next 2 games are must-win games when you look at just kind of the morale around SU basketball right now. When you look at this game as far as Georgia Tech, like you've won 3 straight games, you're trending in the right direction. Like, how do the Yellow Jackets view a game like this?
I think Georgia Tech realizes these are those games against the middle of the pack in the ACC that you got to win. And look, I was discussing this with somebody earlier. There are wins to be had in the ACC. I think we can all acknowledge this is not the dominant Atlantic Coast Conference of seasons past, but that creates opportunity. And so you have to maximize those, especially in road environments like this. So, look, it's a gettable game, frankly, for both teams, and there's still such a big middling section of the league where a lot of teams still have some upward mobility to them, and you don't want to look back in the final week of the regular season at January 7th right now and think, oh, man, that was one I really wish we could have had because that could have made the difference in us playing on the second day or the third day of the ACC tournament, or the first day or the second day. So this is a winnable game for both teams, and it's one of those you kind of have to win if you want to separate yourself into that, I think, upper third, let's say, of conference.
When you look, you touched on it briefly there, the ACC as a whole. Like, why do you feel it's been down the last couple of years?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know if there are any easy answers, and I think that would apply to the coaches as well.
Exactly.
I think it's undeniable that we've had a big
since 2020,
what, 6 in legendary coaches in the ACC, and that's tough because look, Roy Williams could recruit because he was Roy Williams and he was at North Carolina. Duke is kind of recession-proof when it comes to recruiting, but Tony Bennett now leaving and Larinaga resigning. But there have been a lot of very decorated, distinguished coaches who have left the ACC and behind them handed the keys over to some maybe more unproven guys. I don't know either how much NIL factors into that conversation about why the ACC is down and maybe the coffers are deeper in the Big Ten and the SEC, and so they're able to skim off the top, whether it's guys out of high school or guys in the transfer portal who would otherwise land at ACC programs. I think one thing that's frustrating me, guys, is the narrative that the ACC is down has persisted the last several years.
Yeah.
But then the NCAA tournament rolls around, and the ACC more than holds its own. And so that's been really exasperating to me. Like, no, the ACC has been a lot better than the pundits at large would have you believe. Now, I feel like this might be that one year where the narrative outside the ACC maybe matches up with the narrative within the conference. This is not the formidable league that we've had of late. But as far as the root cause of it, maybe NIL and the coaches leaving has something to do with it. Maybe it's just a cyclical thing, and the ACC is more susceptible to the cyclical nature of conferences in college basketball. But who knows? All I know is it's still a grind across those 20 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, thanks for your time today, and good luck on the call. I'll see you over at the JMA Wireless Dome here shortly.
And, hey, Paulie, I do appreciate the snowfall you've given us, because after this, Georgia Tech goes to SMU, and the forecast there calls for like 6 to 8 inches. So I feel like this is just the warm-up act for Georgia Tech on the road this week.
It's always my fault.
That's why, you know what? I think Buzz might have been onto something.
I've shoveled twice already, Andy.
Push harder.
I hope people will listen to you, because they don't buy it from me when I say that SEC schools and Big Ten have a little more money than the ACC schools. But maybe they'll believe it if more people say it.
Well, you know what? With how much they pay you to engineer Syracuse basketball, there's not a whole lot left over for everybody else. So I can understand that.
Slim pickings, Andy. Slim pickings.
Yep.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, guys. Thanks.
There you go.
Did you learn anything?
Yeah. I learned I got 45 more minutes of this.
Okay. All right.
We'll talk to Matt